Thanks for joining us, and welcome to the Reptile Livingroom, featuring John Taylor of Herphouse Magazine and James Tintle with ColdBlooded Publishing. The Reptile Livingroom is brought to you by Herphouse Magazine, the premier digital magazine for the reptile hobbyist, and by ColdBlooded Publishing, your exclusive reptile media publishing company. Now, here are John and James in the Reptile Livingroom.
Well, welcome to the show, everybody. Another week of Reptile Livingroom. And I'm your host, James Tintle. And is John here? There you are, John. How are you this evening?
How are you, sir?
I'm doing pretty good. Let me show my ugly mug today.
What? There you are. All right.
All right. So you have a good week, John?
Oh, lovely. It was great. I love moving. It's so much fun. I can't begin to count the ways I would love to move again. Yeah, no. Moving stinks.
Yeah, right?
Oh, man. How's your week?
Oh, it's been quite hectic, that's for sure, but good overall. I mean, last weekend I had some Hondurans hatching, so that's always exciting, and starting this week, I should start getting about a clutch a week, probably for the next 2 or 3 months. So I'm pretty stoked about that. Other than that, not much really going on. Just trying to prepare myself for tomorrow, Friday the 13th, and a full moon.
Full moon. Yep.
Yeah. I think everybody should dig themselves a hole, bury themselves in it, and wake up on Saturday morning.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it till Sunday. I'm just out till Sunday. You know, just to be safe.
Right.
I just don't want to see the zombie apocalypse aftermath of Friday the 13th on a full moon. You know, it's oof. It's scary.
Right, absolutely. Well, we got a pretty good show, but let's touch base with a couple things. Anything going on in Herphouse Mag world coming up?
Herphouse Mag, we got the Build Your Own Reptile magazine, still growing and changing all the time. New articles are being made free. Excuse me. We left up the reptile inbreeding article for free for another probably a couple more days. It's getting a lot of traffic. A lot of people are downloading it and checking that out. Do remember to become a subscriber if you really enjoy the magazine. It is subscriber supported completely. There's no internal advertisements except for the authors. They're right for the magazine, so please do become a subscriber if you can. There's a lot of affiliate codes out there from various authors. I know Jimmy has one. Chad, our executive producer, has one himself. So those are all 30% off the entire website. That's about all that's going on for Herphouse. I know Becky's already started on the design work. I know Lily's article came in. And we also have one from Donna Stonebrook, which we might be putting into Herphouse Mag issue coming up regarding the very subject of videotaping snake bites and talking about dangerous, how to take a bite type thing.
Interesting.
Really, and that came out of the blue, Jimmy. It was kind of weird, and she wrote to me today about that, and so we're taking a look at that article this week, and hopefully get it to appear in the next issue.
Very interesting. Looking forward to that one. I know I have a couple on the back burner that I need to get over to you, and maybe hopefully get it in this issue as well.
Yeah.
So we should have definitely a good issue. And if they're subscribers, can't they sign up for your affiliate program as well?
Totally. If you're already a current subscriber, all you need to do is go to the left-hand sidebar there, click on the affiliate program. It takes you to a subscribe menu, and basically you sign up. And since you're already a current subscriber, we give you an affiliate code. You use that code to give others discounted price, and you also receive a percentage of all the sales made using your discount code. And then the top salesperson also gets an extra added bonus for that month of sales,
and
which happens to be you.
Well, that program is actually growing too, by pretty much by leaps and bounds as well. Good, man.
It's pretty wild.
Glad to hear it. Herphouse Mag is definitely a very online, all digital, great content in that magazine. So anybody that wants to get a subscription, herpetology.com. I really don't have, I mean, tremendous tricolors. We're just now getting into, hatching season. So any of my fans out there, hopefully I'll have some interesting stuff hatching this year. And as far as cold-blooded publishing goes, we got some projects in the works, but nothing ready to hit print as of yet.
Right.
So I'll keep everybody updated, and that's about it on those two. Chad, you got any words for our viewers before we get into this very interesting show we have this week? Nope.
No, not at this time. Sorry.
All right, man. All right, so our first guest for tonight and tonight's show is all about reptile shows, the do's and don'ts. And I'd like to say to Brian Potter, sorry we couldn't get you on. It was just a conflict of scheduling. But Brian was supposed to join us tonight. But we do have Terry Hearing from Dixie Reptile Show in Birmingham, Alabama. The Dixie Reptile Show was started by Terry in 1996 with the help of Mike Bates. Since then, they have filled the void in the Mid-South reptile market by providing herpetoculturists with the Dixie Reptile Show every month. The next show is coming up on July 26, 2014. If you guys are really interested or close by, be sure to check out DixieReptileShow.com, visit their website. And one more thing with Terry is Terry was the first one to produce an A-male Ruthvenite king snake. So Terry, let's welcome you to the show. How are you this week?
Oh, I'm good. Real good.
Great.
Welcome to the show, Mr. Hearing. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you. Call me Terry.
Awesome.
Mr. sounds too professional.
Okay, I'll call you Terry then from now on.
That'll work.
So now you bred the first albino Ruthvenite. Was that what James said?
Who's the first albino Ruthvenite? They popped up out of some wild stock that came from Dr. Garska, who redescribed them. He took them out of the Mexicana group and left them as Lampropeltis Ruthvenite. And so I got babies from his stock, his original stock. His animals were probably 20 years old.
Wow, that's amazing. So now, Terry, just for our viewers, how did you actually begin breeding or even getting into reptiles in the first place?
Oh, this goes back to 5 years old.
Wow, okay.
I was born in New Jersey, so I'm kind of a Yankee, a Southern transplant. Got to move to Florida when I was 5 and was catching snakes everywhere, lizards, turtles. It was paradise. And it's been a fascination ever since, my whole life. I started actually breeding snakes in '87. The Ruthvens were the first snakes I actually bred in captivity, from raising them from babies to adults and then hibernating them and breeding them. So that was really a stroke of luck for me.
Wow, that's an awesome story to hear that you started out with Ruthvenite. That's awesome. Now, what was the actual first species of reptile that you ever kept? Was it the Ruthvenite, or were you keeping some wild caughts that you caught?
No, I was keeping wild caughts, boa constrictors, corn snakes, you name it. I did a lot of collecting and shipping to the dealers in Florida back in the early days when things were wide open. Shipped a lot to Pet Farm and traded for various things that I was interested in from around the world. But at that time, I didn't know much about breeding animals. I just kept them, and on occasion, I'd catch something in the wild that was full of eggs and hatch them out. But to actually go through the whole process, it was the Ruthvens that I did it first with. So.
Wow, very cool. And now, what is it that made you want to keep reptiles versus cats and dogs, or mice and rabbits, or some other cute and cuddly mammal type creature?
I really can't answer that. I just I love all wildlife, and I've spent most of my life outdoors when I can get loose. That's what I do. I'm out looking and finding things. But The snakes and lizards and turtles. Turtles were my passion in the very early days. You know,
Oh,
I
okay.
had soft shells and spotted turtles and painted turtles, and of course, living in Virginia and Florida and Alabama, I had access to lots of water and lots of turtles. And then I graduated
Sure.
snakes, so it, I just enjoy them. I mean, I have dogs, but the snakes are my passion.
Okay. And who would be, in your opinion, your greatest inspiration for choosing the path of reptile breeding and reptile keeping?
That would be Ross Allen and Bill Hast.
Bill Hess and Ross Allen.
Yeah.
Very, definitely agreeable sources on that one for sure.
Well, growing up in Florida in the early days, it was those three places: Ross Allen Institute, the Serpentarium, and Gatorland in Florida. I think Owen Godwin owned Gatorland in Florida, so those were just places that I was in awe when I got there.
Yeah. And let me ask you, how many hours did you spend out at the Miami Serpentarium?
I think we only got to go there twice.
Oh, really? Okay.
Cancel the phone call. Sorry about that.
No worries.
And then we went to Silver Springs on several occasions. Of course, I watched Ross Allen do his shows with the alligators and milk diamondbacks and meander around with the big diamondbacks. So just a huge fascination for me.
Man, that's incredible. That's incredible. Now, as far as the creating a reptile show, what made you want to create a reptile show in the South there? Was there a niche market that you felt that you could fill, or was it more you wanted to have an avenue for people that were collecting animals, or what was the general inspirational for the show?
Well, I had discovered the Ohio Reptile Show, which is, I think that was probably the first one. And that was born in a basement and worked its way up from there. And so I was working with Brazilian rainbow boas and corn snakes and various species, and I could go up to that show and sell animals and buy animals and bring them back to Alabama and sell them to pet stores and individuals. I'd take orders, and back in those days we didn't have internet, so I had a file full of price lists from all the breeders, and if somebody wanted something, I'd look through my price list and get them a price and then figure out who I could get it from. And after having done the Ohio show, I thought, well, there's nothing in the South in a monthly show at all. And I had talked to Mike, and Mike Bates, and he gave me some pointers on how to get started. And we spent 6 months advertising in the 3 publications that were available to advertise in, and I got a big group of vendors. The first show we had 65 tables, I think, and it started from there. And that was 18 years ago.
Oh my gosh. Now, as far as first-time vendors are concerned, what's the process for anyone wanting to vend at one of your shows, as far as like table costs or time frames in order to secure an actual table itself?
I'm pretty lax on that. I don't like the last-minute things if I can help it, but I do realize that some people are not sure whether they're going to make it or not, and so I do have to allow for the last-minute things. I try not to get people in the habit of hitting me at the last minute, because then I'm shuffling tables the day of the show. But for the most part, we're pretty lax. I don't charge in advance unless I have someone that's just makes a habit of not showing up or standing me up on more than one occasion. Then I make them pay in advance. If they do it again, I just bar them completely, because I really don't have time to deal with someone that's not reliable. So basically what my vendors do is they call me, they tell me they want a table, and I tell them I'll see them at the show, and they can pay me the day of the show.
Right. James had before you from earlier about people that, like you said, don't show up or what have you. You know, what are the repercussions for that, or something to that effect? What was the actual question that you had for him, James?
It actually goes into more as a I can't remember, John. I'll have to look it up. Really.
Okay. It was basically, if you run into people that, like you had said, make a habit of calling you at the last minute and then not showing up, you actually just go right ahead and let them know that they're just not going to bend at your show any longer, is basically how the routine works there, Terry?
Well, this is the way I work things. Um, in my job, I'm on call because we work storms and things, and so I don't mind. Say, for example, if you called and said, "Hey Terry, I need a table for July 26th," and you call me at 2 o'clock in the morning on the 25th and say, "Hey, my car's broke down. It doesn't look like I'm going to make it." I'm fine with that, and I appreciate that phone call. But if you don't call me and wait 2 days later and tell me you had a flat tire, I could care less.
Yeah.
That's I'm going to tell you, don't do it again. If you do, I'm going to bar you permanently because I just don't have time for someone. Everybody's got a telephone. Everybody's got a cell phone. You can get in touch with me, and I'm available all night long and into the morning. I don't care what time you call. So it's just a courtesy thing,
Right.
And
No,
then of course I do bar some vendors for animals that are not up to par. And I've only done that once with one vendor. He was selling B-grade animals, and I just don't allow that. So.
wow.
And that kind of leads me into a question too, Terry. When you bar people because less than par animals, and you said it's only one at your show, but do you share that person with other shows? I mean, and we can tie this into maybe theft. Maybe you found somebody that was stealing from one of your shows, show vendors. And do you share that kind of information with other shows that are locally around you or nationwide? Because I'm sure you're friends with a lot of, other show promoters and people that put shows on. Do you guys share that kind of information?
We do. We do share problematic vendors that possibly owe people money and maybe actually not paying their bills or trying to cut deals on credit and things like that. Yes, we do share that information. Because it hurts the whole industry if I allow someone that I've thrown out of my show to go to another show and do the same thing. Venomous is a big problem in the shows that don't allow it. And we get people sneaking around, trading them in the parking lot, bringing them in and hiding them under their tables. I just don't tolerate that at all. That's another way to get barred from my show permanently. If I catch you trying to trade or sell venomous, you're gone.
Now, staying on that topic too, as well, the sneaking around of reptiles, doing sales out in the parking lot or in the hotel at other shows, or do you have a strict policy in your show that there are absolutely no sales outside of the building? And if you are caught selling animals outside of the building, will you be barred from actually even being a spectator within the show?
That's a really good question, and I've only had that problem come up once, and it was a vendor that was selling rodents outside because I had a rodent exclusive at that time, and I just went outside and put a stop to the sales, but I didn't bar that person. He just thought it was okay to sell them outside, and it wasn't. But I really did. My worst problem was the people dealing in venomous. They know it's illegal in the city. The city has this ordinance against dangerous animals, and they knew it was against my rules, but they would sneak them in anyways. And so that's my biggest problem. But as far as trading around in the hotel, you couldn't stop that if you wanted to. That's hard to catch.
Right. It's just, that's kind of a question that, a lot of people, I mean, I know I visit Daytona as a vendor, and there is a lot of outside swapping around. It's done in secret, but I'm just wondering, as a person that puts on the show and owns the show, if there's any kind of repercussions on it. I notice at some of the shows that there are guys walking around with backpacks, and they walk around the show. They don't pay for a table, and it may not happen at your show. It does happen at other shows, but they walk around and they sell out of their backpacks.
Oh, wow. That's a new one. I haven't seen that one before.
Myself personally, as a vendor at a show and seeing this, it truly upsets me that it's allowable, and I try to tell the show promoter, hey, listen, this guy's walking around selling, spiders or snakes or baby snakes out of his backpack. He's going to a table, working a deal, and then finding somebody else and selling it to him. Is that something that you don't like done at your show?
I do not, and we do encounter that, and I had to set some sort of guidelines for that because for a single table at my show is $65. If you wanted to come to the show and you had 3 corn snakes you wanted to get rid of, I really don't expect you to spend $65 and sit there all day with 3 deli cups or 3 containers on a table. So what I tell people when they say, hey, I got a couple of snakes, can I bring them in? Because I have billed my show as a buy, sell, and trade, and it is not a captive bred exclusive show. If they have a number of animals, I make them rent a table and sell them. If they're going to bring in a few animals, because people buy on impulse, they buy 2 corn snakes 1 month, and 2 months later they want to get 2 king snakes. So I'm not going to stop them from bringing the animals to the show, but what I ask them to do is offer them to the vendors first and not run around trying to sell to the customers on the floor. And most of the time they come in and sell them to the vendors, and then those animals are on the table and for sale again, and it's not affecting the vendors' sales.
Great. I mean, that's a great way to go about it, because there are a lot of hobbyists that only have a few snakes to sell, and that's a great way to go about it, because I sell what I produce personally at a show, and a lot of people do, but there are a lot of vendors that do buy wholesale and sell. Now, I know you had just mentioned that your show isn't particularly a captive bred only show. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So do you allow, as we know in field collecting, sometimes we see snakes that are under par, and being not a captive bred specific show, I mean, do you walk around and look at the health of each animal, and do your other vendors actually help out in that situation? Because I've been at shows, and I'm sure many other people have been at shows, that you see subpar animals. Do you find that your vendors open up and say something?
They do. My group is a very tight-knit group, and they will come to me if they see something they don't like. We screen the entire show before it opens, looking for animals. For example, and I'll use you as an example, if you had a Honduran milk snake with a dry shed on it, I'd ask you to put it underneath the table, because I don't think that's a good presentation of an animal to be sold. If you want to put it in a tub of water and soak it for a couple hours, get the shed off of it, and put it out for sale, that's fine. But I'm not going to allow you to sell animals that have dry sheds all over. I think that's very tacky. If we see animals that are too skinny or too thin, they go under the table. And I make that decision, and I hate to do that, but on these premises, I have to be somewhat of a dictator and make the rules and enforce them whether they like it or not, because I'm looking out for the customers as well as the vendors.
Right, and it just goes with an overall of the show. I mean, if your show, no matter who the vendor is, if your show is selling quality animals, you're going to be a quality show. You're going to draw more people to the show because they have, good response with the vendors in your show. It kind of leads me to another question that I actually have, is accountability. And I'm just going to give a quick example. Is say there's a complaint against a vendor for selling a sick animal, or a thin animal that wasn't caught, or maybe it was under the table but yet they sold it anyway. Do you have any say-so in refunding the money to that person from that vendor? Do you hold that vendor totally accountable, and do you have any say-so within that transaction?
This is the way I have handled this over the years. I make a strong suggestion to the vendor, and I don't get into these disputes unless I'm brought into it. But if the customer comes to me and says, hey, I bought this snake from so-and-so and it died and it wasn't in good health, then I go to the vendor and I ask him what he wants to do about it. I'm not going to tell him what to do, but my suggestion is to make it right with the customer, because if not, a person bad-mouthing you will follow you around forever. Those words hang. You just can't get rid of that. So most of my vendors are really good. And again, I've screened most of my vendors, so I've got a good group of vendors. They will replace the animal or maybe replace an animal at half price. And if the customer's happy and the vendor's happy, then I walk away from it. If I get complaints from a vendor and this becomes a habit, then I put them out. Because again, I have to look after the customer just as well as I do the vendor. So I don't want customers leaving my show going, well, I bought a snake from this guy and it died, and I bought a snake from that guy and it died. I don't want to see that. And if people are selling wild caught or import animals, I make sure that they mark them as such so that the buyer knows that he's buying an import animal, and I have something to go back on. If they come to me and say, well, I bought this boa constrictor and it died, well, you knew it was an import, so you were taking the risk at the cheaper price. You could have went 2 tables down and bought a captive born baby with a guarantee on it. So you have to educate your customers. And like I said, we're a close-knit group. I have missed one show in 18 years, and that was because it fell on an elk hunt that I had in Colorado, and I just couldn't turn down that elk hunt. But, I mean, I am very dedicated to this show. Even to give you an example, I had to have surgery to have some cancer removed, and I scheduled that surgery the Monday after my show, so I could have a month to recover, so I wouldn't miss the next show. So that's how I feel about this show and the group that I work with. I mean, you know, it's a good bunch of people I've got in this area.
That's great. Amazing. That's great. Actually, I want to touch on something that you had just mentioned, and Terry, you're just leading question to question, and
exactly.
This is great. But you had touched on a screening process. Can you give me and our audience the breakdown of the screening process that you utilize
for the vendors?
That's correct.
I can usually go to the BOI and find out what kind of a history they have.
And that's the Fauna Classifieds BOI?
Fauna Classifieds. And usually, I mean, yes, I've owned the show for 18 years, but I've been in this hobby for early 80s, late 70s, even further back. You know, I'm friends with Tom Crutchfield and know a lot of the old timers and stuff. So I kind of know who my people are that are coming in, and my new people, if I have to educate them and help them along the way, I do. I will, any of my vendors that want information about sales or presentation or anything, we're always there to help them out. We sex animals for the public. If someone comes in and says, I got this ball python, I don't know what sex it is, bring it to the front. I do that for free. I don't charge. I've never charged and never will. We're a service. I mean, you know, you come to this reptile show and you want to know something, we're going to get you an answer. If I don't have it, I know somebody that does.
That's awesome. Actually, I know you visit Daytona Show and other shows as a spectator. Do you find that other shows give that service to their vendors as well, or are they a little bit more like, no, we don't handle that part?
I really haven't seen anybody that does what we do. I mean, it may go on, but I haven't noticed it. I mean, and I know the girl that owns Hamburg up there, and she's a really sweet person, but she's so busy up there. She's got a very popular show with a huge crowd. I don't think she would have time. Now, she might direct somebody to another vendor that could sex animals or look at animals or make decisions, but with the crowd that she brings in, it would be a nightmare for her to stop what she was doing.
Right. Yeah. You know, and it kind of brings me to a point, John. You know, I see at some shows there's actually a vet on, you know, in the show. They either have a table that's, you know, the promoter's giving it to them to have a vet on hand for any questions. I mean, is there any disregard of maybe, you know, kind of going with a flow of having a vet at all these shows and, you know, take the time, and if somebody wants to have a snake sex, maybe charge $1 or $2. I mean, really, how hard is it? The vet's going to do it, or, you know, do you think that's a possibility that maybe vendors would take advantage of, or the general public might?
That would be a good idea for probably some of the larger shows, because they could have an animal looked at by a professional. I am very fortunate because over the years I've had 3 different veterinarians at my show, and I still have one who's a very good friend of mine, so we get a free vet service
wow.
through him. He's a great guy. His name is Tom Harbin. He's out of Manchester, Tennessee. So, I mean, he can help us with pretty much anything.
Right.
He does breed reptiles, and that's what he does for a living. He's a vet, so he's on top of it. If we have a problem that I haven't seen, then we just take it to him.
I mean, and I think, John, what's your feeling? I mean, by providing a service to the general public and the vendors themselves like that at a cheap discounted rate, I mean, having a vet on hand is always great as far as I'm concerned, and especially in the ball python trade. I mean, we're looking at tens of thousands of dollars being traded for some of these animals. I mean, if you're going to spend that lump of change, wouldn't you spend $1 to take it to the vet to have it inspected? What's your thoughts, John?
I would, I mean, if I'm going to drop, because I've been to some of the shows and I've seen some of the $10,000 snakes that, are up for sale, and not even just from a show, but any reptile that you pick up anywhere, that should be the automatic first thing you do is go to a reptile vet and get it checked. That's just general husbandry 101 for me personally. And then to provide that service at a show, it seems like the folks on the Eastern Seaboard started that, or at least that's where I first heard of it, was at a New York show. Somebody had mentioned that, hey, they had this vet there that was doing whatever we needed. He would sex a snake, he could, identify a snake, check it for, any scalation issues, just give it a general a physical exam, I guess would be the best way to put it. And it's an awesome service. Like you said, charge a couple of bucks, maybe even donate part of that income to a conservation fund, such as USARK or something like that.
That's not a bad idea at all.
I think that's maybe something we can, as Reptile Livingroom and Herp House Mag, and being active, maybe we can contact some of these show promoters and, kind of pitch it to them. And maybe I'm sure they have vets that come to the show, and a lot of them have them on hand,
Sure.
that they can pitch to their vets as a service. I mean, and if they don't want to take it personal, take the cash personally for their own practice, like you said, donate it to USARK or, some sort of foundation. So
I'm sorry, that's something Becky brought up to me tonight, that she wanted to get started with Herp House Mag too, was with some of the affiliate codes. We know that not everybody wants to get money, so what we're going to start doing is implementing a program where you can be an affiliate, and any affiliate income that you would make can be donated to whatever conservation fund that you would like it to go to via the PayPal account that you have set up with that code and what have you. So that's another avenue that we're helping out the community there.
Right, absolutely, and that's good. I mean, every nickel and dime helps, and when you start taking it in an overall aspect of the community. But let's get back to Terry here real quick.
Actually,
Terry,
I have a question for him, if I could jump in.
Sure.
As far as nickel and diming, because this is a question that, as far as regulations, Terry, are concerned with the state and the property owners where the show is held, what kind of, if you can speak to it, obviously we don't want you to give us a financial breakdown of your records or anything like that, but just a general idea as far as state regulations, licensing fees, the whole nine. I mean, it's got to be, an astronomical amount, and yet you're only charging $65 per table. I mean, that seems really inexpensive to me, because I've talked to some of the other show promoters, and we understand the cost involved in setting up a show with all the electricity and what have you. So how do you do this? Is this just, once again, the community that you're involved with makes this available to you?
Well, I have a full-time job, and I breed snakes myself. So this is not something I make a living at, and I really would not want to try and make a living and have shows, every weekend or try and promote really large shows. And I hate to call it a swap meet because it's more than that. It's grown into more than that. But, with that being said, the costs are not that bad. You have a business license, an annual business license. Of course, you pay sales tax
Mm-hmm.
on your sales. Then you have your rent. You have liability insurance, which some show promoters do not carry, and I'm not real fond of that because you could lose everything with an accident.
Right.
But all in all, those costs are not that bad because we get a pretty good walk-in crowd, and with the table money, there's a profit every month. And it's not a huge profit, but it's
Sure.
something I really enjoy doing. This is, this is a passion. Like I said, I don't miss any of my shows.
Exactly. Exactly.
But
Now,
yes,
as far as first-time vendors and required equipment, what suggestion would you give to someone that just, say, hatched out their first clutch of milk snakes or king snakes and calls you up and says, "Hey Terry, I'd really love to vend at your show. What do I need? I've never done a show before in my life."
well, the one of the things, several of the things that I recommend to first-time vendors: bring a table cover. If you happen to forget one or don't have them, I have extras so we can cover the table, at least make it look presentable. Put your animals in clear containers where they can be seen. They need to be clean. If an animal messes up a container, that needs to be clean before it goes out. And for the person selling, they need to present themselves too. They don't need to come in unshaven and rough looking and hungover. That's not a good picture when someone comes up to buy, because they're buying from the person and they're buying the animal. And if they feel if the person is neat and clean and presents himself well, those animals are probably raised that way. If everything is sloppy and there's shavings all over the table and the tablecloth looks like it was used for a picnic tablecloth, then I wouldn't buy an animal off that table. So presentation is a big part of reaching to the public. And the other thing that I ask my vendors to do is talk to the people when they come by. If someone comes by and is looking at something on your table, speak to them. Say hello. What are you doing? What are you interested in? Are you having a good time? At least strike a conversation, because then they're going to stop and talk to you for a minute and look at your animals. If you don't speak to them, they're going to take a look and they're going to walk away, and you're probably going to lose a sale that you potentially would have gotten. So we work with our vendors a lot to get them up to speed.
That's great. That's great information, Terry. And, the attire aspect of it, what clothes you wear, how you present yourself. I mean, you're presenting your business and your animals. I mean, if you're looking dirty and scrubby, people will question, well, how do you keep your animals? And not because they see that the animals are dirty, because they could be the cleanest and most well cared for, but the fact that, you're presenting yourself, unshaven, or, ripped up clothes, or, hungover, smelling like, you haven't had a bath in a week. Do you find, I mean, I know your show is a little bit smaller, but I'm talking in overall throughout your whole entire reptile career. Have you found actual vendors that you were like, no way, I'd never purchase an animal from you because of the way you stand forward? And you don't have to name names. I'm just asking, is it a common thing?
There are quite a few, and no, I won't name names, but yes, there's some that shouldn't be selling animals.
Now, being in the show promotion and having your own show, do you discuss that with other show promoters, or do you just kind of like turn a blind eye to it? Or do you say, hey, listen, this guy's, his animals aren't that great, and he's like, kind of iffy. When you're visiting other shows, do you mention stuff to them?
Well, it depends on. I really don't want to go out and try and badmouth a vendor. I don't like it at my show. Because you have an assortment of people. You've been to the shows at Daytona, and you've seen the different vendors behind tables, and I really don't condone one vendor going, well, my snakes are cleaner and better than his, and because he's got a dirty container and that snake's a little bit thinner. I don't like the bad mouthing going on, but if there is a vendor that's got really junky stuff and another show promoter asks me about it, or asks me about that person, I will tell them the truth, but that stays behind the scenes with just show promoters. Um, we try not to, don't want to hurt anybody's business. I mean, I would rather go to a person and say, hey, if you clean these tubs up or clean the glass on your displays, things would look a little nicer. I'd rather coach them into knowing what to do, because some of these people may not know what to do.
Right, absolutely. And I didn't do shows for a long time, and my first show, I was actually, I wouldn't say scared, but I was like, wow, I see all these different tables going to shows for all these years, and I wanted to make my table presentable. And of course, I don't have my banner up behind me this show. I was too lazy to put it up, but I wanted to make my table kind of stand out, where people could see the logo and say, hey, listen, I've seen this guy. I've seen him at Daytona. I've seen him at, this show, or he's coming to my area, or something like that. Do you find that you actually coach as a visitor, not from your show, but, as a visitor? Do you talk like business sense with some of the vendors that, or are they even inquiring? Because I know a lot of people are ashamed to say, hey, can you help me with this?
Well, and you struck on another thing. There's a lot of huge egos in this business, because, and
No.
I'm one of them.
Really?
You are too. We want to have the best. We want to have the prettiest. We want to be known for this and that. So a lot of times, vendors don't want to open up and ask questions, or they feel like maybe they can't talk to one of the big guys. I don't consider myself a big breeder or anything in this business. I'm just somebody that enjoys it. But I know I've had some vendors that came to my show, one in particular, and he said he felt intimidated by us because we had so much experience. And he opened up to me, and I said, I hate that you feel that way, but we all started at the same place. It's just some of us have been in it longer and gotten further up the ladder. It's not that you're inferior to us. You can feed off of our experience. I'll be glad to help you with anything I know. I don't hold back secrets, or not tell people how to hatch eggs or whatever they need to know. But some people do feel that way. They feel like they come into a show and here's all these experienced breeders, and they've got their little group of snakes, and it's the first ones they've ever produced. And so I have seen that with vendors. But and I do talk to a lot of vendors. I have a lot of friends in the industry, which is another reason I like this business, is I have made friends all over the United States.
In the world, I would suppose, too. I mean, with the digital era that we've, brought in the past decade or more, 15 years, I mean, that really has increased the connectability from herper to herper and, hobbyist to hobbyist.
Oh, the internet has been huge. It's been huge.
John, you want to continue?
Yeah, I was going to ask Terry. Terry, as far as bringing the internet into the herpetoculture industry, have you seen that impact ticket sales at all, or any? Is there an increased cost to provide ticket sales via the internet, or anything of that nature that's going on for you?
I think the internet is just a really good avenue to advertise.
Okay.
For example, I use Facebook. I have a page there. I post pictures of snakes being born, snakes breeding, new things that I've got going on. I encourage my vendors to do the same thing, and they build a following. And between the tagging and things that go on Facebook, that's a really inexpensive way to advertise.
Okay. Very cool.
People don't read the newspaper anymore. If they're going to read the newspaper, they're going to pull it up online. If they want to find something, they go online. I find myself doing the same thing. I don't even look at the phone book. If I need to find a business, I punch it in a computer and pull it up. I don't have to flip through a phone book. So we've become lazy because of the computers. But I find that the internet is big. And in the beginning, when I was selling animals, to be able to take a picture of an animal and send it to a customer in California, when he says, well, can you show me this corn snake, and I can take a picture of it and click it, and it's in California, and he's looking at the snake that he wants to buy, and your sale
Exactly.
is done within, minutes.
Right.
Prior to that, we used to have to mail photographs. I mean, this internet is huge to me.
Very true. I remember that mailing photographs. You get this black and white list, and you read through it, and you're like, oh, that sounds interesting. I need a photograph of that, this, and this other thing. Then you'd send your order in and wait. And
I have saved some of the photos, and I have photos of the first albino boa constrictors that came into the country, and they came from Steve Osborne. He was partners with, I think it was him and Ernie Wagner and John Ruiz were partners on the first 4 albino boa constrictors to come into the United States. And I have pictures of those original animals, but they're photographs. There was no internet, so if I wanted to see it, it came in the mail.
Wow, how cool is that to have those photos around? Now, are there, as far as your shows, Terry, is there any VIP entrances or additional cost, like behind-the-scenes passes or anything like that, or anything special?
I don't do that because I'm a one-day show. I let the vendors set up between 7 and 9, and the public is there from 9 to 3, so it's 6 hours, and that's when most of the sales take place. And late in the afternoon, it's mostly vendors swapping and trading at the end of the day. So I don't do the VIP thing, and I don't want to charge extra for somebody to get in early. Be there at 9 o'clock, and you'll be in there with the rest of the crowd and get to see everything that's there. I know some of the other shows are doing the VIP thing. At Daytona, it's kind of nice to get in, early if you're a customer. But that's a 3-day show, or a 2-day show.
Right. And your show is every month, is it?
It's every month, but we're about to restructure. I think because of the number of shows that are going on right now, I'm going to do every other month in Birmingham.
Okay.
I'm going to change it for 2015, and I'm going to add some other shows in some other locations just to change things up.
To reach a different crowd.
Well, to reach a different crowd, and I feel like that after 18 years being in Birmingham doing it every month, I think my vendors are probably a little tired of being there every single month, and I think if we did it every other month, they would fill those voids and be there. And I think for the customers, it's the same thing, because if they miss a show, then they got to wait 2 months to the next one. But
right.
There are a lot of shows in the country right now, and it's tough on the entire business.
And talking about that, Terry, and I'm really interested in, shows were really big in the 90s, early 2000s. I mean, they were just jumping with the amount of people. I know your show is very localized, not so much a national show, but I know you visit the national shows. Have you seen participants coming to the show drop, the amount of people coming to the show? And do you think, could that be because of online sales and the ability to be able to seal a deal a little bit quicker?
I don't think it's online shows. I think it's the amount of shows that are out there now. It's the numbers. Because, as you said, in the 90s, on this side of the Mississippi River was Daytona. I look forward to that every year, and then I would travel to Ohio. I might go to Brian Hahn's show in Indianapolis. And I still make the circuit of the bigger shows, but I've seen their walk-in crowds have declined a lot. And I think it's because of the number of shows. There's a show pretty much every weekend in Florida. I think Florida has got the most shows going on anywhere. I mean, you don't have a free weekend down there. There's a show somewhere in Florida every single weekend.
Pretty much. I mean, and within 5 hours. I mean, yeah. I live in Tampa area, and within 5 to 6 hours, I mean, I could visit a show every weekend.
Exactly.
And a lot of times I see the same people at those shows every weekend. And I kind of question what their sales have to be like. I mean, granted, they're in different areas, but I couldn't see doing a show as a private, hobbyist or a breeder. I couldn't see doing a show every single weekend and continue to be able to pay for that table. You know, at $65, that's probably the cheapest table price I've heard. At least, you know, you're in Alabama, but
Sure.
here in Florida, there's nothing less than $100.
No.
Well, and again, it's the structuring of the shows. For example, up in this area, there was a show every weekend within 100 miles. So why would anybody be excited about going to a reptile show when if they miss one this weekend, they go to one next weekend in another city? They've got, you know, there's a circle around them, and there's a show every weekend. And it's the same way in Florida. And I see the same vendors going to do these shows, and they're not making any money. They're basically spinning their wheels, and some of them are trying to make a living doing this. I don't see that as a very good living. I think they'd be better off to spend their time at home working with the animals and building up a good inventory than to try and catch every single show every weekend, because, you know, some of these people are just not doing very well. And I see more people falling out of the business. Competition is stiff. Auctions have come up, which have kind of hurt pricing. So this industry is going to go through another change, and it's now.
Right, and being around, I mean, being in the hobby as long as you have, I mean, I'm sure you have seen a greater move in the hobby and how it structures. And in businesses alone, you have ebb and flows and give and takes and stuff like that. One question I do have for you, and then we're going to take a quick break, but is there any required equipment? I know you had mentioned a table wrap, and is there any other, you know, like lights? Is there anything else that you would, you know, tell your vendors, hey, this may help out, you may, you know, show off your animals a little bit better if you do this?
Lights is a good thing, and of course I have an art background, so color is another factor. You know, a lot of people put black backgrounds under animals, such as gray bands, which makes that orange just jump out. So, you know, a lot of times colored substrate is good to make your animal stand out. Lights is a good thing. You know, have a receipt book, have bags, have hand sanitizer there if you're going to let someone handle an animal. At least offer them the opportunity to put some hand sanitizer on their hands. That makes the vendor feel comfortable, whoever's handling their animals, and that person walks off and he's not going from table to table fooling with snakes. So that kind of helps. But and nice displays, you know, clean glass on the displays. You can build your own. It's not like you have to go buy the most expensive ones. Or
Right.
even the larger deli cups make great displays. You know, you put a good colored substrate at the bottom of them, and, you know, you have that nice, clear deli cup.
And actually, talking about deli cups, I actually changed it up at Daytona this year. You know, I viewed some of the videos about the ham show and how they present their animals in these square tubs.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually transferred and used Chinese food containers as my hatchling tubs. And I found, because it takes time to actually vend a show, like Daytona, I vend Daytona. The Thursday before I leave, I spend more than 10 hours in that room packing animals, making sure all the animals are good. I mean, there's 10, 12 hours the day before I leave for the show. And then, of course, I get there Friday. But I changed up. I did, you know, the Chinese food containers. They were white, you know, containers with a clear lid. And I found that I could cut my time by a lot in packing them and bringing them back. So as long as, you know, the week before I made sure all the containers were clean, you know, I could just pack them up and take them to the show. On the way back from the show, I go through a strict policy when I come back from a show. No matter what, they go into a tub that has either prevenamide on it, or I'll actually spray the animal down with Nix solution in a gallon of water to prevent anything that might come back. It leads me into a question for you. Have you ever run across a vendor that had mites and kind of like it was just looked over. He didn't notice, but it had come up. Have you ever entered that situation?
Oh, absolutely. Um, in screening animals, sometimes I'll notice animals with mites, and I make the vendor aware of that, and he's going to have to make his customers aware of that so that they can treat the animals accordingly and not go home unknowingly. We've all gotten mites, um, and you can get them from the best breeders or the worst. It's just, it's a that animal is a parasite that gets on the snakes, and a lot of times the mites are not visible. There's eggs on the snake. And when you take that snake home, you look it over, you don't see anything, there's nothing in the eye sockets, and then, 7 to 10 days later, you got a hatch of mites, and they're everywhere. Um, but you mentioned Nix, and I've been using that for 20 years. That's my favorite uh, remedy to get rid of mites.
And I found that I actually was there was a post on Fauna Classifieds about it, and I actually read the post and I had tried it out, and I think as a vendor, it's a great way to take that proactive step. I set up all the containers when I come back already. They have ready for water bowls or ready for bedding in them, and I just grab the snake out of one and I do it in a totally separate room. So the containers that I bring back from the show, you know, are totally separate and they're not encroaching into my room. And I
Sure.
think a lot of vendors have strict policies on how they bring snakes to the show and how they bring them back. But I think what a lot of people don't realize is these vendors spend a lot of time preparing for the show with their animals.
They do, and like I said, most of the people that I have been in this business a long time, and they're very reputable vendors. I mean, they've got quality animals, and um, you'll you'll see some of the guys that do a lot of hustling, what I call hustling. They buy, sell, and trade. Those are the guys that are going to show up with mites, and basically they traded for an animal and didn't notice it, and that animal went into a rack of a bunch of other animals, and the mites spread, and it happens. But we do look for that also at the show. Probably wouldn't be a bad idea to carry a spray bottle with Nix with me at the shows and just have it. And that way, if somebody's got an animal with mites, I can spray it down on the spot.
Right. And I think that's good for any vendor that's wanting to actually vend or a new vendor coming in. I mean, there's been so many changes throughout what we do as hobbyists and so many advances that any little tip or trick that can help you out to make you more successful it is the way to go. And hopefully we're putting it on. But let's go ahead and take a quick 2-minute break. So if everybody wants to grab something to drink and maybe hit the bathroom, the restroom. We're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and we'll be right back. All right, and we're back. Might have been a little quicker than 2 minutes. I forgot to time it. So I want to go ahead and let's take some quotes by our audience. I saw some come up. Let's see if we have any questions. Here we go. We got one by Rachel Winchin. She says, what are some tips at getting diversification at shows so that the show goers don't end up seeing table after table of the same thing? I'm guessing she's replying to specifically ball pythons as we see today. Is it tough to balance that with your full-time job and doing shows monthly, Terry? That last question is, I guess, directly towards you.
That is a great question, and it's something we are working on all the time. And it's tough because in the early days I had customers going, I want to see the cool ball pythons, I want to see pieds, and I want to see albinos, and I want to see pinstripes. And these were snakes that were tens of thousands of dollars. So I'm trying to get these guys in that are breeding these animals, and now that I've got all these cool ball pythons there, everybody's jumped on the ball python wagon, and I do have a lot of people selling ball pythons. So we're always looking for vendors with new stuff. I want to see corn snakes, I want to see lizards, I want to see tree boas, green tree boas, emerald boas. I want to see a diversity, and that's what the public wants to see. And so we're always working on trying to do that and change it up. You know, if you remember back in the day, they used to call Daytona a corn snake festival because everybody had corn snakes, and they had every flavor of corn snake that was there. So that's a tough one because you don't want to turn vendors away, but you do want to bring in vendors with different things. And we're always trying to reach out to people that are breeding things that I don't have at the show. So
great.
And I do ask my vendors to get a little more diverse if they can.
Oh, and you got that question from Lindsay that I was just about to bring up, James. Thank you. Terry, one of the comments is from Lindsay Sharp, who was a guest last week on our show. The problem with getting snakes inspected, they can look visually fine, but there is a lot more going on internally via blood work. But it would still be good to have on-hand check for the physicals. And she says, I've been at shows where I know someone has mites actively treating for, and we're at the show. Let me see, the rest of the comment was cut off. I'm trying
and we're at the show and vending at the same time. It was just a comment from Lindsay. And I think we pretty much covered it pretty well on that. I do have a comment from Glenn's Reptiles on Facebook. He said, listening to it now, great information and an interesting discussion. Thanks for letting me know about it. So Glenn, Reptiles, he works with colubrids. I think he works with some other stuff, but check him out. It's Glenn's Reptiles on Facebook.
Cool.
So John,
our friend Rob Williams commented, said the show looks good and sounds great, guys.
Thanks, Rob.
Yes, thank you, Rob.
And Rob Williams is also on Facebook, and I totally forget mentioning him, and I want to give him a big shout out today because he does our intro music and our voiceover, and he does our outro music and voiceover, and he also did the commercials for herpetoculture.com, and he did the commercial for the Guide to Honduran Milk Snakes for me. The voiceovers, I did the digital work through ColdBlooded, but Rob, sorry about it. I want to give you a big shout out today, and I really appreciate all the hard work you did for us in getting this show up and running too as well.
Tip of the hat, Rob. Thanks so much, sir. Kindly appreciated. Awesome job on everything that you've done for us. You can't say thank you enough. Christine Kilroy did comment. It says, I truly don't understand how anyone can display an animal that has retained shed on their table. I have seen that on numerous occasions at 2 shows I attend locally. I have also seen a baby Kenyan Sambo regurgitate a pinky at one of my local shows. I personally don't produce enough litters to vend either of my local shows, but if I did, I would make darn sure my babies were up to par before vending one. which is a good point. And did we lose Terry? It looks like, James.
It looks like we have. He kind of dropped out. Let's see if we can get him back on.
Yeah.
I don't know
Chad, can you work on that real quick for us?
I don't know if he has the information for Terry, but he can. Chad, you can get him on Facebook, man. All right, John. Well, let's jump into some other stuff here.
Yep.
About going to the show. I mean, us as individuals.
Right.
How are we? How are we supposed to present ourselves as spectators? Within the show.
One of the things that I've always done, covering shows for Herp House Mag, or as a journalist, one of the things that I've done is I've always asked, "Hey, may I take a photograph of your animal?" And that has gotten me more inside information, or more helpful information than I could even talk about. Just a simple, exactly what Terry was speaking to earlier, just simply being courteous to people. Asking before just snapping a photograph of an animal on a table. Just simply asking the vendor, "Hey, would you mind if I took a photograph of this animal because I want to publish it in a magazine, post it on Facebook?" Just tell them what you're going to do with it. 9 times out of 10, if all they'll ask is, "Please take my business card and make sure to attach my contact information to the photo." And it's just simple common courtesy of, being respectful to others at the show, specifically the vendors.
As a vendor at a show, and one of the biggest East Coast shows, Daytona, I get a lot of people wanting to photograph the animals I have on my table. And if I have time, I have no problem opening the lid and putting it underneath the lights that I have set up on my table, and working with them to get a good photograph. I do not request them to have to use my information attached to the photo. It's not something that I request. Now, if I personally took the photo and through the internet, then of course. I mean, if I personally took it, I own the rights to it. If you use it on your website, I'm going to want you to tell the people that you got it from me. But for the people visiting the show and taking pictures of my animals or anybody else's, I think just a quick answer or question to the vendor of, "Hey, can I take a picture? Do you have anything against flash photography?" Or, I noticed some vendors actually have a sign on their table that says, "No flashes, please."
Right.
Terry, do you run into any issues with vendors getting upset of people taking pictures?
No, I usually don't. But most of the time, the people that do want to take pictures are courteous, and they'll ask. Even at the bigger shows, if they want to photograph an animal, they usually ask. They don't just come up and start snapping pictures.
Now, Terry, that brings up another good point. As far as the press is concerned, of course, you probably want or have been on the news several times for the reptile show and things of that nature. Do you find that you're able to draw a decent amount of the public from the local press there by putting out, press releases and public appearances on, say, morning show news or radio shows or anything like that?
That does help quite a bit. And
okay.
I used to do a lot of venomous demonstrations, or safety meetings, as we called them.
Right.
And that was a big draw to my show, even though I did not have venomous there. But
oh wow,
I did a lot of those programs for different things: hunting groups, sporting goods stores. The last ones that I did were for utilities companies, because those guys are in the field, and in the spring and summer, they're around snakes all the time. So that was a lot of fun, and I got a lot of response.
I can bet. Now, as far as presenters at your shows, I know I've been to a couple of different shows on the West Coast, and one or two of them they've had guest presenters. Like someone had recently released a paper on chameleons and their behavior. Do you have presenters come to your shows at all?
I do not, because again, we're there for 6 hours, so it's basically, that's when most of the sales are taking place, and it would be hard to take out some time to have someone do a demonstration. Now, at some of the 2-day shows, they do that, and different vendors will come up and talk about different animals, and that seems to work out pretty well. And if I had a 2-day show, I would do that.
Gotcha.
I would love to do an educational venomous program for customers and the kids and things, but that's a tough one to do with the liabilities.
Now, is that the mainstay for the holding back on doing venomous shows? Is the insurance cost, which must be astronomical in order to hold an actual venomous show?
Well, that's what keeps me from doing it.
Okay.
And I know there's a lot of really great people in the business that have venomous and they're very responsible. But what I see with most people with venomous, it's that macho thing. I got the big motorcycle. I got a giant rattlesnake. I got the baddest dog. I don't want that mentality at my show. I just don't want those guys there. And there are some people that have really hurt this industry fooling around with venomous. They get bit. They do stupid things. Their caging is not right. Their education that they put out is terrible. And
right. Now, speaking of
even responsible for a death for selling venomous snakes. He was linked to a guy that died from a snake bite. So I don't allow those people at my show, and I don't condone it.
Oof. Yeah, I think I know the incident that you're referring to too. It's the most recent one.
In Tennessee.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's probably the one.
Oh man, yeah, that was not a good event to happen.
Well, now, I think we're on 2 different pages there. You're thinking of one of the snake handlers, the religious snake.
No, not Mr. Bibby.
Okay. This happened probably 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, where a gentleman was sold some venomous snakes and was later bitten, and it was found that he had no experience and no business and no license, and the list just kept going on and on and on of
got busted.
The reasons he should not have had those animals.
Yes, and
Yep.
he was a highlighter at one of the shows. I'm not going to mention any names, but
Right.
that particular individual was barred permanently from Birmingham for trading rattlesnakes in the parking lot. And I don't think he should be in the show circuit at all, but he still is out there and presents himself as a professional, and he is nowhere near a professional. So
I want to interject something. Talking about venomous, we know, venomous should be, regulated within the hobby, and we should make sure that the good people are the ones that stand out. And unfortunately, the bad people are the ones that get all the publicity, but that's part of our society. But I want to ask you, Terry, besides venomous that, you don't sell at your shows, are you able to sell like the Burmese pythons and the larger snakes? And if you do you hold your vendors responsible to who they actually sell to?
I kind of coach them in that direction, not to sell large animals to inexperienced people. I don't want those animals being taken out at the shows, because we all know snakes, they're reptiles. They're going to react differently to different situations, and the tame Burmese that you packed in a tub the night before is liable to come out of that tub, like a wild Burmese, and bite somebody when you open the tub. So I'm pretty strict on those animals being handled or shown or draped around somebody's neck, and I do not want someone walking around my show with a snake wrapped around their neck. That's just a recipe for disaster, because those snakes usually strike at somebody walking by. But I do kind of watch the larger animals, and of course I've seen some people take some really bad bites from burms and retics, and that gets all over the internet, and people are a little more respectful of those large snakes. Of course, now the Burmese, you can't take them across state lines right now, so
right
within the state.
Right. And I mean, I'm sure your vendors are, you screen your vendors and stuff like that. So I'm sure they're not going to sell an 8-year-old a baby Burmese to grow up. They're going to make sure that mom and dad, are part of the buying process and they understand. So, but I mean, other shows, it happens. I mean,
yeah, it's been going on, and it's because of what I call the greed of the vendor. He's chasing the dollar, and he's not concerned about his customer. Um,
And that's something I brought up in an article that we did on the auctions in regards to large snakes. Is I was talking to a gentleman, good colleague of mine, and he's like, "Yeah, I bought this Burmese at this auction, a number of years ago." And I said, "Let me ask you something. Did they ever inquire as to your experience, who you were, or how old you were, or anything?" And he's like, "No." Well, he said, they could have sold it, sold an 8-year-old, with mom's credit card, literally a 12-foot animal.
yeah.
No questions, and it's like, wow. That's just, and you brought up another good point, Terry. As far as you're seeing a lot of videos of people getting bit and things of that nature, and this seems to be a revolving subject for James and I for some reason. We keep coming back to human snake bite videos. What's your opinion on those as far as persons that are named individuals in the industry purposely getting bitten to present snakes in a certain light or try to educate the public, as it were, according to them? What's your opinions on those types of videos?
I'm not real fond of those. And I have people that are close to me in the business. Some of them are vendors, and if they put up videos of them showboating with venomous, tailing and doing things that they put out there on Facebook for the public to see, I usually kind of frown on that, and I'll correct them on it, because as us in the industry, being the so-called professionals that we're supposed to be, we don't need to be putting videos out showing kids that we can grab a rattlesnake by the tail and pick it up, or we can palm it under its belly. I think that's wrong, because a 10-year-old, he thinks he can do that, or
Exactly.
he's learned to do that, and that's something that I don't do. I've done it, but I don't do it anymore, and I don't present that. I use hooks and tongs and try and present myself as a professional handler that doesn't ever want to get bit again. I have been bitten, and it's not a fun experience. It's very expensive, and usually time consuming, and it can cause permanent damage. So I really push these younger guys, if you're going to work with venomous snakes, use tongs and hooks. Don't pick them up by the tail. I know we can, and I know Steve Irwin was a master at it. He tailed everything. He grabbed everything with his hands, and he's a great guy, but he's gone. And that probably would have been his demise anyway. Something probably would have got him if it hadn't been a stingray. It would have been something else if he kept grabbing things by the tail. So
For sure.
stay away from that kind of stuff as much as possible.
And even with some of the rear fang stuff that's available in the hobby nowadays too. I mean, some of the Asian rear fangs, they can have some potent venom, and each person may be differently reaction to the bites, and that brings me to Western hognose too, which is a very popular colubrid in shows. And I don't know if you have any vendors that work with it, but it's be careful. I mean, just because they're non-venomous and they're sold as non-venomous, educating the public is always the best way to do it.
And I agree with that. I really don't allow. I do allow the Western hognose, but some of the other rear fangs I cannot allow, because Alabama does not allow tropical venomous. And I've known people to get bit by Western hognose and get swelling and tingling and a bee sting effect.
Right. Yeah, that was a garter snake for me that did that to me. And totally my fault, of course. Goldfish missed the dish that I was trying to feed it in. Reached in, grabbed the goldfish out of the substrate, put it in the dish to rinse it off, the snake went to grab the fish again and grabbed my finger instead and swelled up to about the size of a golf ball and, scared the living heck out of me because I'd never had that encounter before, which is the case with any venomous snake. You don't know what your reaction is going to be until it happens. That was interesting. And in regards to vendors, Lindsay Sharp asked, have you ever had to turn a vendor away for any reason, as far as, maybe overbooked or, they did something that maybe didn't sit well with your particular guidelines to the show or something like that? And I think you touched on that a little bit earlier too, didn't you?
I did. This is a balancing act, especially with the monthly show, to have a facility large enough to accommodate all the vendors that you want to put in there so that the public sees a very good show. And from month to month, it's a juggling act to get, I want to get 60 tables in there and I want X number of people through the door. Well, the next month, I've only got 30 tables rented. So now I'm in a building that holds 60 tables and I've only got 30. And then it doesn't look so good, and your public walks away and says, oh, that show wasn't very good because there was only so many tables. Then the next month, all your vendors are back, and you got 60 tables, and then you got 2 new vendors that want to rent tables. You don't have room for them. So trying to keep a room the right size is a very difficult situation, and I have had to put some vendors on hold because I was just full. As far as turning them away at the show, I have not. I have settled some disputes among vendors that had arguments that were about to turn into altercations, and I stopped that immediately. These are family atmospheres, and I just do not allow that. If you want to get kicked out of my show, start a fight with a vendor or start running out and get going, I'm going to put you out real quick. And I have done it. But no, I really haven't turned vendors away.
I actually have a question for you, Terry, and as a show owner, prices, vendor to the vendor, same animal, one's got $50, one's got $100. Do you find vendors arguing what the going rate of the animals are, and other vendors saying, hey, how can you have $50 on an animal? That animal's worth $250. Do you find that happening in your show?
I do, and I see that that's a difficult one to have to settle. In one particular case, I had a vendor that was selling corn snakes, and another vendor came in and was selling corn snakes very, very cheap. And the one vendor complained to me that he couldn't compete, and I said, well, I know that other vendor, and he did a lot of wholesale back in the day. Why don't you go buy everything on his table and send him home? And his response was, can I do that? And I said, absolutely. You can go buy everything on his table. He'll go home. You put the animals on your table and change the price structure. So we do have some of that, but we have some guys that come in and they're desperate to sell animals, and they do sell them cheaper, and it can be a problem. But most of the time, most of my vendors will look around the show and get a gauge for the pricing, and they'll adjust their prices according to where the market is. Because guys that are going to sell the stuff really cheap are not going to last very long. If they're losing money, they're not going to be there next month.
Absolutely. That leads me to another question, too, is, with a monthly show, you actually, I think, as a monthly show, you can gauge the price fluctuations of the animals being offered for sale a lot better than, say, a twice-a-year show or, a big national show where there's a lot of vendors. You can't really tell. I mean, one vendor may have $40 on this one, and then, my table may be $70, and then you go to another table and you see the exact same type of animal for $90. It's hard to gauge at a single show. Do you find it easier for your vendors to gauge their price structure show by show?
They do, and they talk amongst themselves. Like I said, the group that I have they're pretty much all friends with each other, and they discuss pricing and hey, let's let's get these animals at the same price or within a few dollars of each other. So they work with each other on that.
Great, and that's always good. I do have a question, and I know you're a single day show, and this may lead into a 2-day show. Escapees, um, they happen. I mean, the snake pushes the top of the deli cup out, and the snake gets away. What are your rules on escapees?
Well, I try not to have those, but most of the time when a vendor loses an animal, they're not coming to me to let me know. It's usually the facility lets me know that there's a snake or a lizard. I think I've had one vendor actually left a bag it was a Honduran milk snake of all things, in a box, in a bag, in a cardboard box on a table after we had left the show. He just left it there. And of course, the facility calls me and they're horrified because they don't like snakes. And here we're all gone, and I don't even live in Birmingham, so I assure them that I'll have someone there to pick that animal up. And then one of my other facilities that I had rented actually caught a large tokay gecko, which he was doing fine. He was eating spiders and whatever was in the building, and they caught him in the closet, so they saved him for me, and I retrieved that animal. But I haven't had a lot of that. Most of these people, they're pretty conscientious about their animals, and they usually I don't have many escapes.
Right. And going to bigger shows, and I hate to keep on reverting back to Daytona because it's the most local to me and the one that I actually vend at. I know a lot of the local shows, and also I think Daytona is, if there is an escapee, that animal is now part of the show, and it gets donated to the Ozark auction, or it gets donated to a specific fund or whatever. You don't secure your reptiles, and they get out and they're found. Typically you won't get them back. There are some shows that do give them back, but for any of the new vendors that are watching this, make sure those cups are secure however you need to and appropriately sized, because you don't want to lose that $1,000 snake that is your pride and joy for the year because it crawled out of his cup.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I have another question on theft, and being a monthly show, have you encountered actual theft during a show?
We have had very little. On a few occasions, I've had vendors come to me with animals that were taken. I would say maybe 3 or 4 occurrences in 18 years. I did catch one of the scammers that was doing the internet thing and scamming people, and he was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he would snag pictures of animals and offer to trade them or sell them to other customers, and his deals were usually you shipped him something and you received an empty box. And then he was getting high-end stuff like albino boas, and he was bringing them to Birmingham and he was selling them. And one of my vendors actually caught him and pointed him out, and he was one of the persons that owed another one of my vendors, who was also a personal friend of mine, some money. So I just actually caught him and brought him outside the show and collected the money that he owed to one friend that I knew of. And then we worked with a guy that had the albino boa constrictor stolen, and we basically put this guy out of business. And then we had another group that was doing a lot of shoplifting in pet shops, and I had pictures of them, so I posted pictures of them, and we were looking for them. So I don't have a lot of problems with that because, like I said, we're a pretty tight-knit group, and I'm not very tolerant of stealing at the show.
Right. In your experience with other shows and going to other shows, if there is a theft, do you know of any show that provides vendors with any kind of insurance on their animals? And I'm typically talking more of the 2-day shows where you bring in the animals on Friday, they sit in the building overnight till Saturday, and then they sit in the building again on Sunday. Do you know any show that has some kind of insurance for their vendors saying, hey, we guarantee your animals to be secure here?
I do know that most of the shows have someone that stays with the animals overnight. Um, I, I'm almost positive Wayne down there in Daytona has someone that stays within the facility at night so someone can't come in because, at that place, you can imagine the volume of expensive animals that are there just under, covers. Some of the vendors take their most expensive animals back to the hotel with them. They bring them back and forth. I've been known to do that myself. But for a show, a 2-day venue, most of the shows I know have someone that spends the night in there with the animals. So if there is a break-in, it's basically a security guard situation.
Absolutely, and you're right. Wayne does lock it up. Everybody's out. They do their final walk. They lock it up, and there's security guards there watching it. And no security guards are there when you show up at 9 o'clock the next morning, and they're the first ones out as everybody else is going in. So
he does.
Speaking of taking expensive animals back to the hotel, Terry, we have a question again from Lindsay Sharp. Does Terry see any trends? What is going to be the next big thing, or any cycles of what's hot? Are colubrids or lizards on the rise, or is it all BPs? LOL.
It is not all ball pythons.
We have confirmation it's not all ball pythons. Thank God.
She's really wanting to pick my brain on what's out and coming up next. I can tell you that there is leucistic hognose on the horizon. There are albino black-headed pythons on the horizon. The trend is shifting towards some of the rare monitors. I've seen that.
Oh gosh, don't say that. My wife will hear you. She likes monitors.
Well, I do too. That's another one of my favorites. I think what we're going to see, and in talking with a lot of the breeders, and myself included, I've bred all kinds of things over the years. And I didn't jump into ball pythons because I wasn't chasing the dollar. I always liked ball pythons. And I told myself the albino Burmese was probably one of the most beautiful albinos I'd ever seen. But it just got too big. And I said to myself, if somebody comes up with a yellow and white small snake, that would be the holy grail. And it was the albino ball python. That was the snake. It and the pieds were the two top animals. So, yeah, now that everybody's bred ball pythons and the market has leveled off, you'll see guys like myself and other breeders will start going back to what they enjoyed doing and breeding some different things. There's some animals that I have not produced that I would like to breed, and I'm going to go in that direction. I've never produced green tree pythons. I've had them. I've never hatched a clutch of eggs. So I'll be looking for some really nice green tree pythons to put into my collection and downsize some of the ball pythons. So that trend will change. And there's always new animals coming across. I've actually got and it's a ball python, unfortunately, but it's a morph, and I don't know what it is. I've got to prove it out to see if there's a secret, and then I'm going to have to name it. So, and there's a lot of people with things out there that are coming across.
Gotcha. And actually, that comment was from our executive producer, Chad. It wasn't from Lindsay. I had made a mistake there. But Lindsay actually beat us to one of our next questions. What would be your favorite memorable experience from a show that sticks out in your experience of doing the shows over these past 18 years? Is there one specific incident that just really sticks out, or is it a couple of small ones, or?
I would have to say I have a vendor who started doing my shows when he was a kid, maybe 10 years old, and he is now a vendor. And of course, I had basically forgotten that this was the very kid that has turned into an adult. He disappeared for a while and then showed back up. That kind of made me feel good to realize that we cultivated this youngster into an adult, and he's still interested in animals, and he breeds them and works with them and has become a vendor. And a lot of youngsters have grown up with me. Danny Pate, who is deceased now, was one of the old timers in the business. He started coming to the shows with his son and his grandson, and now his grandson is a very experienced breeder, very knowledgeable. youngster. I mean, he's
Wow.
out of high school, 20 years old, and he's been with us since he was 13 years old or so. And he grew up in this business with us, so he's been at all the shows and learned from his grandfather. And him and his dad are breeding snakes. And I mean, Danny Pate is one of the legends in the business from way back. So
Yeah, I would say that has to be a really that would definitely be a fulfilling experience for sure. To have those old timers, like you said, his grandson is now an achieved breeder, and it's like you watch the whole process of growing up, and that would be a phenomenal experience.
well, it was, and I knew Danny Pate when I was a teenager because he lived outside of Birmingham, and he was one of the few sources that you could actually go pick up 100 mice at one time. If you didn't know a breeder, you weren't getting them. You were paying premium at the store. So he was the guy, and then he had all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, I got to see my first king cobra at his place, and he took it
Wow.
out of the bag and actually pinned it down with a broom and put it back in the bag. And I'm thinking, wow, king cobra in Alabama. So,
Wow, you're an Alabama win. You pin a cobra with a broomstick just to put it back in the bag.
And you talked about feeders. At
Yeah,
your shows, do you have a specific feeder supplier that you utilize every show? That's their show. There's no competition coming in. And not only with feeders, what about dry supplier, dry goods, tanks, stuff like that? Do you allow more competition, or do you keep a handful of specific ones each show, and they have that show dedicated to them?
well, you're speaking of an exclusive where they're the only ones that can sell. I have one person that they have the insect business, feeder insects, and that's because it's hard to get a cricket vendor to stay with me month after month after month. I don't charge for exclusives like some shows do, but what my requirements are on the only one exclusive that I have is that they're there every month and they supply crickets and feeder insects to the people with lizards, because I don't want a customer coming in to get crickets and they're not available. And the market is limited for insect sales. Now on rodents, I had an exclusive with one of my vendors at one time, and it worked out quite well for a while. But then he realized that since he had an exclusive, he could charge what he wanted to, and he steadily kept raising the prices until he was ridiculous. And people were buying rodents in the parking lot from other people the day of the show because they didn't want to come inside and pay these exorbitant prices. And I just went to him and told him that we were done with the exclusive. It was over. And so I let different rodent breeders come in. But I do have one in the Birmingham area that supplies rodents for the show. And I've had more than one at times. And, sometimes I may have 5 or 6 people with a tub of rats there. Don't particularly like it, but I can't tell them not to bring them because I know some of these breeders get excess, and that's usually what that is. Somebody's got 20 rats in a tub. They're getting rid of some stuff that they can't move or they
Right.
can't get off. So.
I just lost my train of thought, but I actually had another question.
well, I
is-
have a question for Terry. Actually, as far as being a monthly show, does that enable you to offer discounts as far as to say like Herp Society members or like Armed Forces or I believe in the States it's Boy and Girl Scout troops and things of that nature?
We have done that in the past, and all law enforcement I do not charge.
Oh, okay.
Come in and show badges or come in uniform, we don't charge them. I just feel it's a good gesture to have those people come in whenever they want to, and they're our protection on the streets at other times, so I appreciate what they do. I don't get enough military in there to offer military discounts that I know is military, but all of the police officers in the Birmingham area, they're willing, they come in and out of the show whenever they want to. And plus, it's just added security when they're in there kicking around. If somebody's thinking about doing something, they'll think the uniform's in there, so that benefits me too.
For sure, that would definitely give me pause for thought if I was a criminal, seeing, a few cops walking around that are, in uniform and armed. That would definitely give me pause for thought there.
Oh, sure.
So, let's see here. What other...
I actually have a question for you, Terry. And this is going to tend to a conversation that John and I had about the overall hobby. John and I are working on a project that includes specific words that are used in the hobby, like attack, blood, mean,
Monster.
monster. Do you, I mean, in the overall scheme of things, do you find the use of those words as like shock value for people to come look? I mean, are you for it, against it? Does it not matter?
Does it actually work?
I really haven't thought about it that much. I know back in the day, and I'll mention Tommy Crutchfield, his price lists had several adjectives describing him, and he's known for that. But now, other than that, I really hadn't thought much about it.
Yeah, it's just something that we're going to continue to ask our guests because, going over and actually doing some back research, and anybody's open for this discussion, and hopefully our audience will tell us, their thoughts on it too. I started researching words like attack, blood, mean, that were used in video titles. And it's amazing to me to see the amount of viewership using single words like that. And we're talking 3,000 times if you used it or didn't use it in the same video type. Knowing that, and eventually I'll have all the data for everybody and it'll be published in Herp House magazine, but knowing that, do you think that shock value drives the mass majority to the hobby, or should us people that respect the hobby, been in the hobby, we want to promote the hobby in a very educational way, very positive way? Do you think we bring in and sustain the newcomers to the hobby?
I would say we should probably stay away from that. I think that takes away from the professionalism.
And I think that's what a lot of us have, but it's kind of strange. I talk with many people and I ask them the same question about those simple words, and they don't mean a lot, but when you utilize them in a hobby that's so under scrutiny by mass media, and you're a respectable person in the hobby, and or an unrespectable person, or just a person in the hobby, and you use the words to describe attack, and lizard attack, snake attack, shark attack, whatever it might be, that's a shock value that brings people in. They're expecting to see something gruesome.
Well,
and I think, go ahead.
And that's human nature. We go to boxing matches not to see somebody win. We go to see somebody get knocked out. Car races, you want to see that car flip 14 times and go into flames, and you really want to see the guy crawl out of it, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So we're all looking for that. That's that morbid curiosity.
Right. But do you see, is there a way that we can, as a hobby, band together and try to promote more educational stuff from within, from the good guys? We have the internet, so we pretty much know, hey, if you're going to be the bad guy in the hobby, it doesn't take long, and you're from coast to coast, bud. Your name is all over, plastered all over the place. But do you think that we as a hobby can join together and really promote those educational ones versus those shock value ones?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do it all the time with my vendors, and we touched on this before, making videos of, reckless handling with any kind of animal, alligators, big lizards, big snakes, whether they be venomous or not. And I call it basically showboating. You're trying to draw attention to yourself, and in a non-educational way. So, and of course, the turtle man is being bombarded, and that guy's just pure entertainment to me. But to the public, he's a different kind of bird.
Poor John up there in Canada can no longer watch him.
Yeah, I'm devastated that I can't watch Turtle Moron. Jim was our good colleague Jim Harrison likes to refer to him. Jim Harrison has had some run-ins with the Turtle Moron and
he has
his escapades, and it just never gets old with that guy.
And good guys, good guys in a hobby, where mass media has confronted them and said, hey, listen, can we, videotape this, videotape that? And when they finally see the cut end, they're like, that's nothing like what I thought you were going to show. And,
Right.
It's happened time and time again here in the hobby. And
It has.
how do we stop it, though? And the only way we stop it is say no.
Well, that and to try and present educational.
And let me ask you, Terry, what would be your, say, top 3 tips for helping promote the good guys? And then we're going to jump into our famous last question of the evening with you here.
I would say to try and highlight the good guys as much as possible. I mean, the media is going to go after the idiots. I mean, as soon as someone gets killed by a giant snake, the media is all over. And I hate when those things happen, but I mean, the media just destroys things. They distort and destroy, and they hurt us. I mean, everybody gets bit by a poisonous snake. Well, he had thousands of them, and they got out of his house and they're crawling around the neighborhood. That's not the case. But they want to sensationalize it because that's how they get attention.
Exactly. So it's basically just pointing this, re-aiming the spotlight or highlighting the good guys that we have out there, and just.
If we can, and we need to screen our own. I've said it for years. We'll put ourselves out of this business if we don't stop the guys that are doing the stupid stuff. And I've done my part as much as possible. Like I said, I have barred people permanently so that they cannot come to my show and interact with the good guys. If they're not there, they can't showboat, they can't sell their rattlesnakes or whatever it is they're trying to push. And I mean, there's some people in this business, if we don't get them out, they're gonna float around and cause us damage.
They're gonna do nothing but hurt us. Exactly.
And I think.
Oh, go ahead, James. Sorry.
And I think that's what John and I are trying to tackle as a project, and actually with Reptile Livingroom. And I'm going to start asking all our guests, if you find somebody that makes a very educational video, go to our Facebook page and post it on there. Send us the link. Send it by email. G+. If it's a very educational stuff, John and I are very educational based, and that's why we have Reptile Livingroom, because we want to get the information out there to you folks and be good, scrutinized, peer-reviewed information. And Herp House Magazine's dedicated to that as well. Terry, if you run across anything or you would like to give a shout out to anybody that you think is worthy enough of your shout out, now's the time to do so before we hit this last question from John.
Yeah, exactly. Please do.
Oh, wow. Terry Vandeventer is probably one of the most upstanding educational people I know of, and he does presentations and has done for years and years. I've known him, and he puts on a great program, and he is by the book. And when you mentioned videos, we had started making some videos, collecting and showing the animals in the wild, and I want to continue to do that. Time is a little tough to put that together, but as we start to put some videos together, and I'm not trying to get on TV or get out there, I just want some educational videos. We've got some. I did some demos for a guy that sells tongs out of California, and we used his tongs collecting cottonmouth. He's put them on his website. But it doesn't hurt the industry to show somebody doing something professionally, not killing the animals, not taking them, but just collecting them, taking some pictures, showing how a set of tongs works, and then releasing the animal and going on. And that's a good thing. And again, Steve Irwin and some of these guys on TV, they did just that. They did it around the world. They weren't bagging and tagging these animals and taking them to sell them. They were collecting them, letting you look at them, see what they do, what they don't do in their natural environment. So that does help us. And we really don't have a TV personality right now that I can think of. Most of the guys that snake, I take that back. We've got some guys in Florida that are still trying to do some stuff on TV.
Right. Now, Terry, as far as our last question for the evening, if money and legislation or laws were taken out of the equation, what would be the ultimate reptile species that you would keep if you could?
Gila monsters.
Really? Okay.
Yep. That's an animal that fascinates me, and I've not been around them enough. I'd love to go collect some. Of course, you can't do that anymore, but I'd like to see those in the wild and collect them and breed them. Do what I've done with other animals. Find the species, find a pair, get them stabilized in captivity and reproduce them. I think that'd be really cool.
And imagining why you haven't done so already is because of legislation in your area.
Yes. Alabama, it was unfortunate. I was able to stop the laws on the first go-around, but on the second go-around, we couldn't stop it. They passed a law that you cannot own venomous reptiles if they're not indigenous to the state.
Non-indigenous venomous reptiles, no-go. Gotcha.
Right. And we used to be wide open. We could have anything. We could have cobras, we could have gaboons, you name it.
Right.
With Fish and Game about Gila monsters, because their reasoning was that these are dangerous animals and they don't need to be in the state. And I said, well, no one dies from Gila monsters, and if you know how to work with Gila monsters, you won't even get envenomated, even if you get bit. If you're at your house, which is where you're going to get bit by one of your animals, you just hold it underwater and flush that out until you get him off of you, and you're fine. But they said that because we had an individual that was smuggling animals out of Arizona into Alabama and got busted by the feds, they put the Gila on that list too, so that
oh man,
they're not encouraged to go out and sneak them back. So.
Yeah. No kidding. We have one final comment from Yvonne Hancock, Bob and Yvonne Hancock, actually. We have really enjoyed the show. I will definitely be watching from now on. Thank you so much for great information. You guys did an awesome job. And that's from Bob and Yvonne Hancock. Thank you both, Bob and Yvonne, for your comment. Appreciate that. And definitely appreciate having Terry on the show. What an honor and what an education. Gosh, Terry, I could talk to you for at least another hour or so just about, show regulations and how you stay on top of things. And gosh, I think we're going to have you back on the show at another time, Terry, because
that'd be great.
This is a lot of fun.
This is a lot of fun, and James, I look forward to meeting you in Daytona in August.
Well, I met you a couple years ago. I don't know if you remember. I was with John Lasseter, but I had met you and shook your hand because John and I worked with amelanistic Ruthveni. But definitely, you'll come by and see my table. Tremendous tricolors. I wish I had the banner up for you, but come by. I'm looking forward to it. And
I'll
Terry,
find down there, so not a problem. I will be there in August.
Yep. Terry, thanks again for coming on. We really do appreciate it, and I hope our audience really enjoyed this one. Terry, feel free. I mean, if you think it's going to help any new vendors or anything else, they can catch the same YouTube link. It's recorded, so everybody can catch the recorded version on YouTube through the same link. It'll always be up there. We also offer it on reptilelivingroom.com. And we also have Reptile Living Room on iTunes, so they can download it on iTunes as well, both in video and audio. So in closing, if anybody wants to catch Reptile Living Room, we're all over the place. And if you have a question, I can get it to some device that might not you don't find it suit, but we'd like to get this educational stuff out, and we present quality people on the show like yourself, and hope that it helps out the industry.
Well, I do too, and I will get a link onto my website for you guys too. So
I appreciate that, Terry, very much. Thank you.
no, not at all. It's a pleasure to do that. You guys got a great program.
Really appreciate that. And we are also, just so our audience knows, we are also on the Stitcher Radio program, which is a new program. And from what we've heard, it's actually being installed as a common item in newer car models, I guess. It's kind of like it's a streaming radio service similar to iTunes, but there's some different technical aspects to it that some say are better, some say aren't. Tomato, tomato. It's another streaming service that is available out there. It's called StitcherRadio.com. The recorded versions will be available there as well. And if you have an Android device, Mr. Tintle over there has been so kind as to build a complete app from start to finish for the Android device where you can actually subscribe to the show and get all the updates as soon as they happen directly to your handheld Android device. I think that actually covers all the technical aspects of the show where you can find us.
Yeah,
Sure.
and we'd like to our sponsor, Rachel Winchin. We had her on last week, and I'm gonna kill her company name, and she's gonna kill me. I see the PM on Facebook right now.
That's a sticky situation.
Thank you, John, because I killed it last week. I had it all backwards. But Rachel, thanks for being a show sponsor. And if anybody wants to sponsor the shows, contact John or I. We're working on a whole package, and we'd love to promote the good people in this hobby. So please stop back in next Thursday, same time, 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, and we'll see you again next week.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.